Hello, Karibuni. Welcome to my channel. This is Mkandoya Foods, a channel where we talk about food, agriculture, and soils and everything to do with that. Today we're going to be talking about 5 things that I learned while working for a German farmer in a German farm. So the first thing I learned is that you have to run your farm as a business. They run their farm as businesses here, not a side hustle business, and not as a business where it's a hobby, but as a business where it's your main source of income type of business. It's your bread and butter. It's the only thing you've got to survive. So that's how they run their farms and their businesses, so that you can think really about the people you hire. You think about your inputs, the time of harvest, the amount of things you're going to use for harvesting and storage, and you put all those dynamics together. You run it as a professional business, and you do it really well. The second thing you learn, before we get there, I wanted to mention that in Kenya, for example, we have so much telephone farming, where a lot of people will live in the cities or in cities or areas of cities, and they will still, for example, call and ask if things have been eaten, if the cows have eaten, if the pigs have been given water, if the tomatoes have been fertilized. There's no such thing here. You live and work in your farm. That makes it more deliberate and professional, because you're very much aware of what's going on every single day, and your family is involved in the farming as well. The second thing that I picked and learned is that they have something called Ausbildung als Bauer, which means an apprenticeship as a farmer. So Ausbildung is common here in Germany, where you practice apprenticeship, and it's quite a common field that people actually pick to do, because you learn on the job. You don't just go to school and study something for the sake of studying. Neither do you just study blindly, but you study exactly the field and profession you want to join later. This is actually quite interesting for people who want to be farmers, that even if you've grown up in a farm, you'll still have to go to Ausbildung for you to be recognized as a professional farmer. I think this is quite cool. I think a lot of European countries do this, and Germany has been really big on doing this and ensuring that the kids or the people who are coming out of high school, for example, go through an apprenticeship if they don't want to go through to university, so they can gain a skill, and you learn on the job because you shadow the farmer. So if you want to be a livestock farmer, you will shadow a livestock farmer. If you want to be a crop farmer, depending on what crop you want to grow, you shadow that crop farmer. The third thing is that they pass down the generational knowledge. So if you couple this with Ausbildung, for example, you have farmers who have generational wisdom and experience from their fathers and their grandfathers. And this is quite a good thing, because when you add Ausbildung to that, it means you have prior knowledge or experimental knowledge, and it has you add new innovations and technology into it, so that you're all rounded and you have a lot of information to lean back on. So in as much as, yes, there's a lot of experimentation going on among the farmers, and they do have their own innovations. By innovations, I don't necessarily mean machines, but just different ways of doing things. You can still add that into what you learn in school, the literature that you have in school. So for example, in the farm that I was working on, this is a farmer who had sons who are very much involved in the farm, and who, when he retires or he doesn't want to do the farm work anymore, he's tired, his sons will take over the farm, because they've been working with him all through. So it's quite interesting and an unusual experience. It's also unusual here in Germany for a farmer to have his children also going to the same steps as him. And I found that very inspiring, and the reason as to why they do that is because they run it as a business, and they're very much aware of what they want to do. So the fourth thing that I learned is tech and digitization. So they always use technology and digital apps to assist them in the farm as an assistant, and not as someone who's replacing the farmer. So let's get a baseline to it. First of all, we have to realize that in Europe, the farms are extremely large. There was one farmer who I talked to who had 5,000 hectares of land, and he forgot that he had another, I think, 1,000 somewhere else. That's how large the farms are. The number of farms are reducing, but the farm sizes are either increasing or are still about the same as they were before. Only that now it's more intense, and they're increasing them in certain areas only in parts of Germany. So they use technology. Because your farms are so large, you can't expect to go to the field and use manual labor. You have to use machines, you have to use your apps and technologies to do this. So for me, for example, the farm that I worked in was a dairy farm, and the dairy cattle were milked twice a day. They had a milking parlor and a milking robot. The milking robot would milk the cows anytime they'd want to do it, because it was automatic. So the cow would just go to the station and get milked. That was actually quite impressive to watch, because it's really intelligent how the milking robot knows how to organize itself, organize the cow, and milk the cow. And I know this has a lot of controversies, but you have to make your work efficient for you to produce the amount of food that people need, and for you to produce, for you to, be efficient enough in your farm to make sure you're not using so much energy to get the same or even less output. They also had a milking parlor, and I would go to work in the evening because the morning was a bit too tough. They'd milk at 6 in the morning and 6 or 7 p.m. in the evening. The mornings were hard for me because the farm was quite a distance from where I lived. So that means I wouldn't get the bus to go. It was quite far and quite difficult to get in the morning, but I was always there late afternoon and evening to do milk the cows. It was quite interesting and they really integrated this into their system. So I feel it's nice that when you use tech and digitization to run your business, to run your farm, it makes your work easier and worth doing, because it gives you a more efficient outlook at things. The fifth thing and the last thing is the laws and policies that are in Germany. So for example, Germany has 16 states, and each state has its own laws protecting farmers. So as a result, for example, because this summer was quite dry, and this is the season where they're growing grapes for wine and apples for juice and fruit. Because it was super dry and because it was wet, and the winter before was also not as wet, it didn't snow as much, the ground was very dry, there was not enough rain. Right now it's raining, but before there was not enough rain. So the harvests were really bad, and the farmers had to go through some losses. So the law protects them in such a way that cap where they would make the loss, the government would come in and provide them with pay them, for example, or give them subsidies for the next farming season, so they don't have to go through, so they can break even, meet their costs, and pay who they need to pay, and make, even if it's a bit of a decent profit. When it comes to the EU has policies such as the CAP, Common Agricultural Policy, which the main aim of the policy is to protect the farmers and make sure they have a decent living, to make a decent living. Now, I know all these subsidies and legislations, for example, they always have a lot of controversy, and we'll talk about that in a separate video, but I feel like without these policies, it would have been worse. Yes, farmers already don't make so much money, and I'm always complaining about that, but I feel like if you have policies that work for you, you could always work forward to make sure that as you run your farm as a business, as you use tech, as you encourage your children to continue the same footsteps as you with automation, for example, and being efficient in your farm, and you have the policies to help you do that, then you will be able to practice agriculture sustainably and in a profitable manner. So there's still some way of making profit in agriculture. It's just pretty much the way we do it and how we manage our farms. Another thing that I also wanted to mention is that despite the fact that the income can be low for farmers, the Common Agricultural Policy makes sure that they're able to give farmers subsidies, or if your market price was too low and your cost was higher than the market price, and they come in with incentives that allow the farmers to continue farming by either paying them, for example, if you have an organic farm, because you're protecting the environment as you farm with an organic farm, then you are actually paid to farm. Or you're given lower land rates, for example. So they just make it a bit more easier for you to continue in the agricultural field. And I feel like those policies have actually shaped a lot of things and also brought in a lot of problems in the first place. As I said, we'll talk about it in a separate video. So yeah, those are the 5 things that I learned and picked. And I feel like the most important one is the policies, because once you have that in place, once you have a structure and a government and a regional body that works to support you, then you can really put your best foot forward and work. So I just like to say that being a farmer is very inspiring. I've worked in a farm myself, not just in Germany, but also in Kenya, and you can't work in a farm and not be inspired. So I feel like whatever it is that they do and however it is that they do it, they really need the support. If you have the privilege of ever working in a farm, please go, because you will definitely be inspired by the work that they do, because you actually see the outputs and the result of your work quite soon and quite fast. That's all I have for you today. Whichever part of the world that you're planning on farming, make sure you run it as a business. Use tech and apps if you can afford it. You can put pressure on your government to make sure the policies work for farmers and food systems. And yeah, go for trainings. There's always new innovations and technologies coming out that will assist you and make your work more efficient. That's something that you can also add into your farming business. That's all I have for you for today. Until next time, kwaheri.